2 decades ago, when climate change was still a fringe political issue, Brieger stood in a federal courthouse preparing to file one of the nation's first climate change lawsuits. The case would introduce him to leading atmospheric scientists and climate modelers from around the world. More importantly, it would fire him, from a cannon, into what he now describes as the fascinating intersection of science, law, policy, politics, and economics. That moment marked a turning point for Brieger, a former environmental prosecutor who has since become one of California's most experienced climate advocates. Today, he runs his own advocacy firm focused on creating what he calls runways so that green businesses and bold policymakers can fly. It's a long way from the dinner table conversations about news and politics that shaped his childhood, but the through line remains clear: public service, justice, and the belief that lawyers can change the world. Brieger's path to environmental law began in a household where activism wasn't unusual. His father, a history teacher, and his mother, a social worker, took young Will to the anti-war and civil rights marches that defined their era. The family's immigrant roots and commitment to social justice created an environment where political engagement was simply part of life. But it wasn't any single march or moment that shaped Brieger's values, he reflects. Instead, it was the consistent modeling of public service by his parents and others he admired. His heroes in politics and civil rights were lawyers, and it's no coincidence that both he and his sister chose law as their path to public service. After graduating from Amherst College and UC Davis Law School, Brieger channeled his background as an athlete into legal work. The competitiveness that served him in sports translated naturally to getting results in courts and negotiations for renewable energy and environmental clients. As an environmental prosecutor under 3 California attorneys general, Brieger gravitated toward air quality and climate cases that could have the biggest impact on Californians' health and the state's natural environment. But he quickly learned that meaningful environmental change required understanding how all parts of government function, not just the courtroom. His legal acumen and negotiation skills caught the attention of the Attorney General's office, which sent him to the state capitol. There, he worked to move civil rights and environmental bills into California law, gaining experience in the legislative branch that would prove invaluable throughout his career. Brieger's unique perspective comes from his work across all 3 branches of California state government. As he puts it, one cannot expect to change government policies without knowing how the government actually works. This comprehensive understanding of governmental processes has become one of his key advantages in environmental advocacy. His experience spans the full spectrum of climate policy engagement, environmental prosecution in the judicial branch, legislative advocacy in the state capitol, regulatory work with agencies like the Air Resources Board, federal litigation involving multiple state attorneys general, while Brieger's early water quality cases helped improve manure handling practices at California feedlots and dairies. It was his work against energy companies that truly shaped his expertise. Cases involving coal-fired power plants, biomass facilities, petroleum refineries, and transportation fuel distributors gave him an insider's understanding of how these industries operate. The impact wasn't just professional knowledge. These cases provided the foundation for his later advocacy work, teaching him that real policy changes typically happen in legislatures and regulatory agencies rather than courtrooms. As an environmental prosecutor, he describes his industry impact as modest, compared to what legislative and regulatory changes could achieve. That groundbreaking multi-state climate lawsuit connected Brieger with leading lawyers across the country and top atmospheric scientists worldwide. The experience immersed him in the complex web of disciplines needed to address climate change effectively. Brieger's current advocacy firm reflects his evolution from prosecutor to policy strategist. The firm's mission centers on creating level playing fields for sustainable technologies and businesses. Right now, he argues, the playing field tilts heavily toward incumbent industries, some of which actively resist the changes needed to protect collective economic, environmental, and physical health. His approach combines the athlete's mentality he's carried throughout his career with deep policy expertise. Talk doesn't get you very far in either arena, he notes about both athletics and legal work. You have to back it up with action. The firm works with green businesses and policymakers who understand the urgency of climate action but need strategic guidance on implementation. Brieger's decades of experience across government branches provides clients with insights that pure private sector or academic backgrounds can't match. His optimism about climate solutions stems from 2 fundamental beliefs: people want solutions, and we live in a democracy. When he says, We know how to do this, now private enterprise and public leaders need to get it done. He's speaking from years of seeing what works and what doesn't in environmental policy. What drives Brieger's continued focus on climate work is his recognition of both the scale and the solvability of the challenge. While the public understands that a warming planet is a problem, he believes few people grasp four critical realities: how big a problem climate change could actually become, how significant the changes are that we need to make, how quickly we need to make those changes, how readily accomplished all this is given good leadership. This gap between public understanding and scientific reality fuels much of his current work. Climate needs special attention not because the solutions are mysterious, but because the timeline is compressed and the leadership often lacking. For Brieger, climate advocacy represents the perfect intersection of his skills and values. He's a public servant working on one of the pressing issues of our time, using legal and policy expertise developed over decades of government service. When he's not building those metaphorical runways for green businesses, Brieger can usually be found on or in the water. Rowing, sailing, and swimming provide the physical activity and mental reset that complement his policy work. These aren't just hobbies but essential parts of maintaining the energy and perspective needed for long-term advocacy. His volunteer work reflects the same values that shaped his career choice. Through the CASA program, he helps foster youth transition to independent adult lives. He also volunteers for various environmental groups, extending his professional expertise into community service. With 3 children and 6 young grandchildren, Brieger has personal as well as professional stakes in climate policy success. The next generation provides both motivation and perspective on the long-term implications of today's policy choices. Will Brieger's career arc from civil rights marches to climate courtrooms illustrates how personal values can evolve into professional expertise. His work across government branches, combined with private sector advocacy, positions him uniquely to help green businesses and bold policymakers navigate the complex path toward climate solutions. In an era when climate action needs both urgency and strategic thinking, his experience offers a roadmap for turning environmental knowledge into policy reality.